2002. I was 14 years old, starting freshman year. I was an awkward, nerdy girl that didn't know how to handle attention from boys, so you could say I made things worse for my situation. I had a knack for making friends with weird people no one liked, but I tried to be friendly with everyone I met, so it wasn't a big deal to me. Unfortunately, that was also my downfall. Clubs were a big deal, and they actually had an anime club, so of course I was all about that. First club meeting, I sat next to a couple of friends and soaked it all up. I thought I was finally with my people. Then here comes Stalker Kid. I'd use his real name, but to this day I have no clue what it is. He sat in front of me, and being that person, I said hi. I could tell he was uncomfortable and didn't know anyone, so I was just being nice. And boy did this guy cling to me for that one word. At first, he would just find me during lunch and just stand there mumbling things to me. He had such a soft-voiced, high-pitched, mousy little guy that you just felt unnerved when he spoke to you. The way he would look at you as he spoke, I could never look him in the eyes. After a while, it became more asking about my personal life and what I was into. Me being dumb and naive, I tried to be friendly and chat while feeling incredibly uncomfortable. After a while, my friends and I would move to different tables, benches, and even hallways to avoid him, but he always found me. After about a year of this, my best friend finally told me that if I didn't tell him to buzz off, he would. I really didn't want him around anymore, so sure, go ahead. So one day during lunch, here comes Stalker Kid with his signature greeting, barely above a whisper, "Hey," to my name. My buddy just goes, "Dude, she's not interested." Looking hurt, he shuffles away. I was like, man, you didn't have to be so hard on him, but thanks. I didn't see him much around school after that, except for club days where he would just sit across the room and stare at me while my best friend glared at him. Cut to me being 16 and driving now, minus the awkward club days, I didn't really notice anything from him. That is, until an old gray, beat-up car started parking next to me extremely close. One day after school, he was waiting for me in that car. He started asking me how I'd been, what about prom and all that stuff. I was trying to rack my brain on how he knew that was my car unless he had been watching me before and after school. I started getting there and leaving later to avoid him, because he was like clockwork. Finally, a boy I used to be friends with in elementary school was walking out with me and made a comment about how that guy is always next to my car, and asked if it was my boyfriend. I immediately said no, and he's always following me around, and I hated it. It was really starting to freak me out. Bless this guy, because he walked right up to him and scared him off, threatening if he ever parked near me again, he would beat him up. I figured maybe that was enough to keep him away. So again, there was a small space where I would hear nothing of him except for my friends who had classes with him telling me how creepy he was. One friend had art class with him and said that he would draw nude women constantly in his books. All big, busty poses. Classy guy. Junior year's wrapping up, and I started taking my BFF Phil, we'll call him, to and from school. He was on my way, so I figured why not. At some point, Phil started noticing that little gray car was always heading the same way after school, and made a joke thinking, what if Stalker Kid lived next to him? Small world, right? I could only be so lucky. One day, as per usual, little gray car was following us, so we took a detour. Sure enough, he was with us every step of the way, and it was no longer a joke. We both started freaking out. I pushed that gas pedal as hard as my foot could push it and got out of sight. I went home and told my mom everything, because at this point, I knew this wasn't normal. She shoved it aside, saying I was probably seeing things. Well, it came time for our end-of-the-year club party. Of course, SK, we'll call Stalker Kid from now on, was a senior, so I would never have to see him again. For whatever stupid reason, I offered to host the party thinking he hasn't gone to one yet. Let's celebrate this moment. I was terrified when my dad let him in the door. I don't remember giving him an invitation to the party, so someone must have given it to him. He spent the whole party talking to me, my dad, being all buddy-buddy with him, asking where my room was. I just wanted to cry and hide. It was all downhill after that. I remember there were days where I would hear a car pull up outside my front door, and my room having a window that saw the front, I would call my buddy Phil and peek to see if it was him. 3 times in 1 month, I just hid under my desk and cried on the phone with Phil. Other events from school would be him asking a girl I played softball with to prom, only to dump her and follow me all night. This includes to the after prom, where I never saw him in person. Our high school had a radio TV channel for kids to run, and during prom they would record us going to the stairs and playing around in the gym at after prom for the parents to see their kids having fun. Took one of my friends to point it out, but it showed me playing DDR for a while against my friend Phil, and Stalker Kid was standing right behind me watching for a good 5 minutes. Never knew. And the one that still creeps me out to this day is graduation for his class. Our classes were so big, they did a day and night ceremony where all the students had to attend the day one. I was scanning the crowd to see my friends who were graduating when I saw a hand wave as I passed by. I looked back, and of course it was Stalker Kid waving at me. How he picked me out of the crowd of thousands I will never know. 2006 senior year was great. No signs of creepy Stalker Kid to the point where I kind of forget about him. I graduate, choose a college in town, get a job at a local retail store, and move on. Life was beginning to be normal. I work the gaming department, so you get the weird randos once in a while. One that I saw a lot was this little Mexican guy with glasses. This is important, I swear, who never purchased anything but would just walk around from time to time. Then, this Stalker Kid comes strolling in the doors and walks into gaming and just talks. I asked how he knew I worked here. He said his friends saw me and knew we were friends. I tried to radio for help over and over for someone to come and get him out. Finally, a big guy from computers walks by and asks for my help in the back. Once he pulls me to safety, I tell him everything. From that point, security is aware and is told to watch for this guy. Of course, he wasn't doing anything physical, so all they could do for me is watch out for him. So every time he came in, they would walkie-talkie me, and I would dip back to the warehouse. I started seeing his friend, who we'll call Ninja Friend, constantly, and all he ever did was walk around on his phone. I began to suspect he was texting Stalker Kid to tell him I was at work, because sure enough, 10 minutes later, he would come in too. So I tested this theory and started walking randomly around the store. At one point, a friend who worked register asked why I would do this, so I had her take a walk with me on her break. I told her this ninja friend would follow us everywhere, even just going down a random aisle. Sure enough, he did, and she began freaking out. A few minutes later, I told her my stalker would walk through those doors. Again, sure enough. So I'm making my way to the warehouse, and out steps Ninja Friend from an aisle and says, "She's right here." I just stared at him like, "Who do you think you are?" Stalker Kid walks up behind me and asks why I'm always running away from him, and, he lost my number and asks if I can give it to him again. I say, knowing good and well I never gave it to him, sure. I go to the warehouse, "Right, this is where I work, don't ever come here again," and hand it to him, glare at his friend, walkie-talkie security about him, and sit in the warehouse and about break down. Security tells me later that he also cried while they took him out. Later that day, as I'm leaving work, security offers to walk me to my car. This, of course, isn't the rules, but friends caring about friends, so I say sure. Stalker Kid is out by my car, waiting for me, so this is where security says forget it, and calls police, which are conveniently next to their headquarters. He books it when he sees the car. Now a few years go by. Nothing comes up. I buy a fancy new car and don't see him much. I'm thinking that did the trick, and I'm finally free. My buddies and I are leaving work, ready to hit a night at the bar per usual, a Thursday deal. We're all walking out the door, where we all have to stand and wait to hear the alarm sound to verify it's armed. As we are walking out, I hear it. The awful sound. "Hey." I cringe, grab my friend's arm, and turn. There he is leaning on his car, waiting. My friend recognizes him and asks him what he wants. Guy says he just wants to talk to me. He didn't ever see my car, so he didn't think I worked here anymore. His other friend is sitting in the back seat of his car just staring at me blankly. I start to think the worst. If my friends leave me here, my gut tells me I'm not coming into work the next day, or ever. I'm terrified that he's had years of time to think about our last encounter where I wrote my number down and made him cry. I grab my friend's arm tighter. My friend goes off, pretends to be my boyfriend, and rips into him. My friend is about 2 feet taller and much, much bigger. They get into it, and I'm just standing in the parking lot, and I'm a terrible person for this, but I'm sure you understand at this point, thinking, please, beat him up. He spooked stalker kids so bad that I'm pretty sure he peed himself before getting in his car and booking it. Ever since, if he comes into the store, my friend stares him down from his office and he leaves. Never has bought anything in all these years. Years later, I've moved on, gotten married, and moved out of town. Recently, we moved back to start a business, and to this day I still feel myself looking behind me at stores just in case I randomly bump into him. He caused me to have anxiety, mental and emotional pain, fear, and trust issues for a decade. Even after moving on, I still feel the effects today, and I never even knew his name. When I was a kid, my mom and I lived in a somewhat terrible neighborhood in Chicago. Despite the condition of the neighborhood, the apartment complex we lived in, however, was fantastic. Our top floor unit had a fireplace that saved our lives in the winter. For those that don't live in or haven't ever visited Chicago, the Windy City is particularly icy in colder seasons, and a nice quality, considering the area, AC that iced out the front area of the unit in the summer, but the back area, where the bedrooms were, remained hotter than Satan's armpits. Because of the temperature on hot or cold in these case days, my mom and I would camp out in the living room to sleep on those nights. Despite the rough neighborhood, I remember having a good childhood in the short time we were there. Maybe because my mom always made sure to protect me from the parts of the neighborhood that were exceptionally rough. So one winter night, our apartment was freezing cold. My mom told me to grab my pillows and a blanket because we were going to have a sleepover in the living room. She popped some popcorn, made some hot chocolate, one with no marshmallows for me and one loaded with them for her. We ate and drank and watched Christmas movies before I passed out, clearly white girl wasted on hot chocolate. At some point in the middle of the night, I woke up to go to the bathroom and saw movement in the kitchen. I don't know if it was because I was stupid tired or oblivious to what was going on, but I called out, "Mommy?" even though she was asleep on the couch next to me. The person who I soon realized was a guy because of his huge stature and lack of hair under the mask he wore, walked over and crouched down to eye level in front of me and whispered, "Shh." I simply shrugged, went to the bathroom, and came back to the living room to go to sleep. And that was that. The guy was no longer there, and the door was left slightly ajar. I chalked it up to one of those lucid dreams and filed it away in my repressed memories. I do, however, remember moving the next day into my grandparents' place for about a month until we found something, but because I was so young, my mom never told me why. Not until I was grown, at least. The topic of the apartment randomly came up in conversation, and I offhandedly told her about the dream I remembered I had. This is the terrifying conversation that ensued. Did I ever tell you about the weird dream I had? No, I don't think so. What dream? After I told her, she went pale as a ghost. Now, my mother is a dark-skinned black woman, so seeing her go pale scared the life out of me. That wasn't a dream, sweetie. That really happened. Now it was my turn to go pale. I felt my stomach fall out of myself and stared at her like, "Speak, go on. Why are you silent, sis?" I woke up in the middle of the night and this man was standing above me, staring. I remember immediately demanding, "Where is my child? Where is my child?" I tried to get up, but he growled. Yes, growled, then whispered angrily, "Don't move." At this point, I started tearing up. I saw the fear in her eyes, the utter terror of thinking something had happened to her only child. I hated seeing my mom so upset. It's been just us practically all my life, so to imagine her having to move herself and a young girl out of a neighborhood from sheer terror is hard to say the least. The man just continued to stare at me. He rushed out of the apartment when he heard you flush the toilet and left everything he was going to steal. The next morning, I packed up our stuff and we went to live with Nana and Papa. Child, I left all the furniture, plates, silverware, TV. I just got our clothes and got out of Dodge. But because we vacated the lease, it kind of effed up my credit, but I couldn't imagine sleeping that place another night. We just sat there in silence, freaking out because of my dream, which happened to actually not be a dream, was all too real. I'd say it was simply some addict trying to make off with some stuff, but why walk up to a child and tell her to be quiet instead of just leaving with what you already packed? Why stare at a woman, making her lie still in place, then leave when the kid comes out of the bathroom? Just why? Back when I was 18, I'm a female. My mom had been working in the garden, so she was exhausted and went to bed early. It was winter, so it got dark early. I knew I would be the only one awake for the next few hours until her partner got in from working at 4 a.m. I went about my usual nightly routine, rolled a joint, and went out back to smoke it, as I did every night. You're not allowed to smoke in the house. The house has 2 floors, and my bedroom was on the top floor. After I had my smoke, and I went back upstairs and continued watching whatever. About an hour later, I decided I would have one more joint, then head to bed. I finished rolling and got myself ready to head out into the cold, but just before I headed downstairs, something on my phone distracted me and I sat back on the bed, concentrated on that. When a minute or 2 passed, I heard a loud bang from downstairs. I thought to myself, it's just my mom's partner coming home. Then, seconds later, I realized I didn't hear the front gate open, didn't hear the taxi pull up outside, didn't hear the front door open. My cat is on the bed next to me, so it wasn't him, and my mom is asleep next door, so what was that bang? So I grabbed my taser, which looks like a Nokia phone that my mom also didn't know about, and stick it in my dressing gown pocket and go into my mom's room. Normally, she is such a light sleeper, but because she was tired from gardening, she slept through the noise. I wake her up and tell her what I've heard. She gets herself ready, grabs a metal pole, and we head downstairs. I insisted on going first because, in all fairness, my mom is like 5'6", 130 pounds, has MS, and is holding a flimsy metal pole. I figured my taser would be a little bit better should we encounter anyone. Looking around, everything seems fine. However, the last room we check is the bathroom, which is on the ground floor, to find that the window that sits just above the bath is wide open, and our 2 1-liter bottles of Tresemme shampoo and conditioner, which were on the windows, have been knocked into the bath, creating the loud bang. Of course, we're like, how could this happen? The wind, maybe? Obviously not. We were just really scared and trying to make ourselves feel better. It's like 2:30 a.m. at this point, and my mom calls her partner to tell him someone has just tried to break in through the window, to please come. His response? It's probably just a fox or something. Close it and go back to bed. You guys are just being paranoid. What? So like, well, you're no help. So we make sure everywhere is secure and call 101, UK's non-emergency police, to report it. 5 minutes after calling, 4 police cars and dogs all turn up. They look around, then come to the door and ask the obvious questions. After doing a walk around the house and area, they come back again and ask, do we usually keep our plastic garden chairs under the bathroom window? No. The police advise us that a dodgy gang have been going around the area and trying doors, etc. to break in and steal whatever. They must have taken the garden chairs to stand on it to help them get in. The police also advised that a house a few streets over had been broken into, and everything was taken and the house was destroyed on the inside. I don't think they were ever caught. The thing that freaks me out the most is, had I not gotten distracted by my phone before going out the back to smoke, I would have been outside sitting on them same chairs in the pitch black. Outdoor light was broke, where the intruders would have came around, seen me, and God knows what would have happened then. Growing up, I always visited my cousin who lived in a not-so-great neighborhood. It wasn't that bad, but bad enough to have creepy neighbors. She's half Hispanic and was fairly pretty, so one day she and I were hanging out around the end of her street. I was about 15, which made her 13 or so. We were talking about the boy she had a crush on and laughing about stupid stuff. I remember I was standing up while she was sitting on the curb when this car drives slowly by. We both look up and it's this Hispanic man, probably in his 30s. He was looking at her, smiling, but never said anything and drove off. We didn't think anything about it and actually laughed it off, as what was his problem? A few minutes later, he drives back by, even slower than before. He's closer now and is saying something to her in Spanish. She's always been an angry little ball of hate and said something along the lines of, "I don't speak to creeps like you." He drives off and we laugh again before going back to talking about her crush. Again, a few minutes later he drives back by. This time he looks angry and is still saying something in Spanish. This time I get a really bad feeling and pull her up off the curb and start to pull her away. The lot that we were in front of was empty, overgrown, and had a way to get to her backyard. He's starting to drive alongside the street and keeps saying things we didn't understand, getting angrier. Me, being the paranoid person, even at that age, start trying to get her to run. I'm starting to panic. I think she noticed, and she grabs my hand and does run. We run through the empty lot, not looking back to see if he's still there. The way this empty lot is set up, you can kind of see the backyards of the houses on the street. So we hide behind some of the bushes, waiting for him to drive off. He does, and we start running through our neighbors' backyards and finally get to hers. We run as fast as we can to her back door. My heart was beating so fast. We get inside and for whatever reason we grab a knife. I don't know, we were kids. We look outside from the kitchen and still see him circling the block, looking for us. We hide and the panic starts to die down. We end up laughing about it and decide not to tell our moms. It still creeps me out thinking about it, and I was terrified of being outside at her house from then on. We later found out she told her crush who lived in front of the guy. The crush told his dad, who threatened the creep. Needless to say, I never wanted to be in that situation again. This happened in May of this year, and honestly, I need to get off my chest. For context, I'm a 19-year-old girl, but everyone tells me I look younger. This particular day I was walking home in the afternoon, around the time children leave from school, on what was supposed to be a busy road. It was eerily quiet, but nothing was unusual. I was talking to my friend with headphones on and felt comfortable alone. As my friend suddenly went quiet, I realized my phone had died. I looked a little further to see a lay-by where a cab was parked, which isn't unusual. Sometimes cabs will park there so they can sleep on a break. Despite my headphones, I could still hear a car behind me pick up speed as I approached this lay-by. And the next events unfolded within a matter of minutes, though it felt much longer than that at the time. This, for some reason, made me pay attention. I'm not sure what it was, because my area is known for people racing in cars, but it nerved me. I was right to feel this way because the guy in the car began making hand signals. I was really anxious at the time and was trying not to look, but I think he was trying to get me to come closer. I guess he got annoyed when I began to pick up pace, because he quickly pulled over into the lay-by, a little bit behind this other car, and got out from his side to the pavement. I began to pick up pace again, half running to get to the front of the other car. I got a good look at the guy as he stalked towards me. I'm a fan of true crime, and I often find a lot of the most evil people will look charming or harmless, like you would not be able to tell at all. This guy was not like that. I think that's what struck me originally and why this moment sticks out in my mind. He looked like he was in his early 40s, balding at the top of his head except for ginger hairs at the sides. His eyes seemed like light blue hidden behind those glasses. His shirt was blue, and I remember, I don't know how, it seemed stained at the top, just beneath the neck. He looked like a slob. I can't really remember what else he wore. I think shorts maybe, but it isn't really important. I also saw slightly into the front of his car before he had gotten out, which seemed like it was full of trash. Anyways, as he approached me, now also half running, I just got in front of the other car and went across to the crossing. I honestly can't remember the other guy's reaction, the car in front, I mean. I don't know if he saw all of this happen as he was in front, but I do remember hoping that he was watching me so the other guy felt like he couldn't grab me. The guy following me gets angry and gets back into his car, slamming the door. I'm at the crossing now, which was just in front of the lay-by. I watch him speed down the end of the road as I cross to the other side. At the end of this road is a roundabout, and I was terrified that he was going to turn around the road I was now walking on, where there were no cars, hidden by a shrub at the crossing. I start running to the bottom of the road so I can get onto the one on the right, which is usually busy, not really paying attention. I can't see this car, and luckily there are a bunch more, so I continue walking. My phone is dead, so I'm freaking out. I'm also in my head downplaying the experience already. As I reach the end of the road, I can see my house and I begin to cross it. Behind the line of cars, I see this guy's car again. I don't even know if he saw me. I don't know if he saw me enter my house. I called the police to report this guy. They really weren't helpful, saying things like, "When it happens again, get the license plate." After I told them, I had to run. They did put out a warning, I think. What freaks me out the most is what I learned after. I told my friend, a different one, and she had the same experience 30 minutes earlier on another side of town, but she didn't see the guy. The next thing is the string of disappearances in the surrounding areas. I sometimes see a girl's missing poster on my way to work. She was in my year at school. We have a mutual friend. I'm not saying it's the same guy, just the coincidence made me a little more unnerved. The last thing I considered was that it looked kind of like I was wearing a uniform. I had come from work, so black skirt and white shirt. Was about maybe 10 minutes away from a school at closing time. I don't know if this guy was looking for kids, but it just really freaks me out. My town is known for being dangerous, but I haven't lived here for very long, so I take that with a grain of salt. I was out walking my dog. It was around 7 p.m. and the sun was still shining. As she was walking behind me and I could tell she had stopped, I turned around to watch her. As I turned, I ran my hand through my hair and I was smiling about the song I was listening to. What caught me off guard was the guy walking past me in the exact same second. I felt pretty awkward, so I stared into the air with the same smile, but this time with my mouth open. He smiled at me and then continued down the path. He was wearing loose work shorts, the kind with tools in them, and a white wife beater. I thought, oh God, because I just had smiled at a stranger that was definitely nearing his 30s and I'm only 19. But then again, he could tell I wasn't interested, right? I discreetly paid attention to his body language as I walked behind him. I saw him look back at me several times, but I always looked down every time to try and show I wasn't interested. When I saw he walked over the road, I sighed in relief and headed to the right instead since the path split up. I saw him watch me. I saw his face when he realized I was going a different direction, and I saw him slow down. He came to a full stop and pretended to look around and kind of walked in circles on the spot. Then he walked back over the road and just looked in my direction. He wasn't moving, just had his hands in his pockets and staring right at me. I got nervous at this point. The next bit of the walk is just one long sidewalk that my dog loves to sniff. Every time I walked, he walked. Every time I stopped to let my dog sniff, he stopped. I yanked my dog after me, walking as fast as I could without running, and quickly dialed my dad. I figured I could either act like I was talking to myself, and hopefully he would get freaked out and think I was weird, or at least maybe he wouldn't do anything if he knew someone else would be able to hear it. I didn't want to look back. I could feel his presence behind me, and I did not want to know how close he was. I make a right into a parking lot as soon as I can and start sprinting since I knew he couldn't see me. My dad is laughing in the phone, which calmed me down and made it all seem less serious. I ran the rest of the way home and kept an eye on the front door through the window, just to make sure he hadn't followed. Before going to high school, I went for 8 years to a school in my neighborhood. The school was a few hundred meters from my house, which would be covered in either a 10-minute walk or a 3-minute car ride. One winter evening back in 2010 to 2011, I was leaving school with a bunch of my classmates and we were headed for the bus station. We were all about 13 to 14 and in 8th grade back then. Among those classmates, there was a friend who lived one street away from me with whom I'd usually walk to and from school. Generally, when we left school, we would rather take the 10-minute walk through the side streets to our homes instead of walking all the way to the boulevard, take the bus, and then walk back into the side streets. The reason we were going for the bus station was that it was about 6 p.m. on a winter day, and therefore it was already as dark as it would be at midnight. 2 preteen kids walking all by themselves through those dark streets wouldn't be a wise thing to do. As we were waiting for the bus, I noticed a bunch of boys, 4 of them if memory serves, approaching my friend. These boys were considerably taller than us. We were both around 1.6 meters tall, and they easily had 10 centimeters over us. They weren't adults, though. They asked him for his phone in order for them to make a call. This is where I am glad I wasn't by myself at that point. I am also glad that they didn't come to me first. I was one of the youngest kids from my class and grew up to be more naive than the rest. My friend was 8 months older than me, and with far more street smarts. He told them he doesn't have a phone. That's when I caught on to what was going on, since I knew fully well that he had his phone on him. They came to me and asked the same thing. I responded the same way my friend did. The bus arrived and we all climbed in, including my other classmates and the 4 older guys. While I was waiting at the door, my friend was talking to our other classmates. Halfway through, he climbed down next to me and started whispering. I just spoke to some of the other guys. They live near those thugs. They said that they are most likely planning to chase us after we climb down and steal our phones. When we climb down from the bus, let's run. All right then. We both go to my house. My house was 1 street away from the bus station and close to the boulevard, which his was the next street over and much deeper. In other words, we had to run less than 100 meters to my house, and he would have to run about twice as much to his. I didn't sense any real danger in the situation, since I didn't think these guys would bother chasing 2 boys who most likely have nothing of value on them. It was the safer option, though, as I was underweight and easily the weakest boy from our class, while he was overweight and clearly lacked agility. We probably could barely hold our own in a 2v2 fight, and let alone 2 versus 4. I was also immediately down for the run, since I loved the idea of the thrill it would give us. We got out and my friend put his hand on my shoulder to steady me, since we were still in a crowded bus station and there was no need to run yet. We walked fast to the only street we had to cross, and after making sure no cars were coming, we sprinted. Since he was a bit ahead of us, he could afford to lose a bit of distance, so I asked him if he could look back. Are they following us? They're crossing the street right now. Still in disbelief, I turned my head to look. They were indeed crossing the street, running between upcoming cars after us. This sidewalk, unlike the bus station, was completely empty, so if they caught us here, there would be no witnesses unless a car would drive down the boulevard that very moment. We hurried to my street, turned the corner. I quietly opened the gate and ushered my friend in, after which I got in and quietly closed it. We stood there, in the shade of the trees in front of my yard, watching the street-lit boulevard through my vents. I made sure they didn't know where we went. They searched the crossroad and stopped. They looked around dumbfounded, not realizing where we went. We silently got into my house and told my mom why I came home with an unannounced guest. My friend called his mom to come pick him up with her car, since he obviously could not walk home alone. Quick background. My sister and I work at the same place. We work at a golf course. I've been there for 3 years and she's been there for 2. Overall, it's a great job. I like 96% of the staff. We have one guy, I wrote about him earlier, that was kind of a pain. Thankfully, he's straightened out and has gotten it together. And this story is about a different guy. To be honest, I have no clue what this guy even does for the golf course. All of what I'm about to tell you leads up to what happened with my sister. He told me he worked there, but I was just recently informed he didn't actually. This guy, about early 40s, was nice to me when I started working there. We had good conversations, but at the end of last season and the beginning of this season, something felt off. First thing he asked me when I came back in mid-spring for the start of the season was, "How old are you?" I didn't like that opening line at all. I hate when that's the first thing men ask me. I'm 21, but I could pass for 17. I said, "Why are you asking?" He responds, "Just curious." I was just shy of 21 at the time. I answered 20 and he was like, "Cool." Asked me how college is going, etc., like a normal conversation. About 3 to 4 weeks later, he asked me for my Snapchat. I didn't like that. I told him no, and that's weird. He also decided to come behind the counter while I was busy to ask me something. Unless you work inside the clubhouse, you're not allowed behind the snack counter. I told him he can't be back there, and he was kind of mad. The rule was set by the health department. He decided he didn't like me after that. Now fast forward to about 2 weeks ago, this guy won't even come near me or look me in the eye. I really could care less. Then one day I get a ton of frantic text messages from my sister who was working there. She sent me pictures of him saying all these terribly harassing things to her. He kept saying he could see through her shirt and if she had a Tinder, would swipe left on her. She was wearing a red t-shirt and jeans. He couldn't see through her shirt, and then he said he wanted to take her shirt off. I freaked out. That's my 19-year-old younger sister. I was supposed to drop her off a jacket anyway, so I headed up there. I called the supervisor who was there, and he was shocked. He had no clue and was angry. I got there and was thinking, this idiot better pray he doesn't run into me. Well, he wasn't there, and I got out of there. When I get really mad, I begin to shake. I went inside the clubhouse and stayed there for about 15 minutes with my sister. She was a little shaken up, but okay. She was more shocked because she says he's never hit on her or anything. She said he used to confuse her for me. This idiot also said, "Oh man, your sister's really mean." My supervisor was not happy at all and said that he would deal with it. Well, he did all right, and it was pure gold. We have 2 guys, one in his 20s and one in his early 30s, that work at the golf course too. They're brothers, and we all went to the same school. Well, the 2 brothers don't like the creepy guy, and my supervisor told them what happened. The 2 brothers cornered him and scared him half to death. I'm pretty sure they threatened him. He came back in and apologized. He had the nerve to say, "I didn't mean to be a creep." My sister responded, "Are you serious? You're creepy. Don't ever speak to me again." One of the golfers that comes in all the time with his daughter heard about the incident too. His daughter offered to walk my sister to her car. My supervisor spoke to him the next day and told him he's not allowed to speak to me or my sister. 2 days ago is when I found out he doesn't even work here anymore. I saw him the other day and he wouldn't even look me in the eye. My supervisor was waiting for me to lose my mind on him, but I decided against it. We were packed and I didn't want to cause a scene. I'm just hoping he learned his lesson. This is by far the scariest thing to happen to me. I recently graduated from university in Birmingham, but about 4 months ago I was still living in a shared 6-bedroom house with 3 other students. Myself and another student, Shauna, had been staying up late for weeks doing coursework together in the living room and listening to Sleepy Masquerade permanently. This is important so you understand why we were shaken up even more by the events that followed. Our entire house had decided to go to a local pub earlier in the night one evening, and then we returned around 11 p.m. Half of us went to sleep, but half of us stayed in the spare bedroom talking and listening to music. It was around 1 a.m., and I could hear the letterbox downstairs blowing in the wind and clanking over my friends' voices. I noted it and then ignored it. At least 30 to 49 minutes later, I heard it again. I decided to hang my head out of the bedroom door, look down the stairs where our 2 glass PVC doors could be seen through. There was a dark, tall silhouette with its head turned pressing against the door, his hand on the handle. He must have been there for a long while since the letterbox had been making noises. I felt myself come over with a blanket of cold, like the blood had drained out of my body into the floor. I said in a whisper which felt like a shout, "Oh God, there's a man against our door." I'm certain that for a fraction of a second my friends didn't take me seriously until I turned and they saw the fear in my face. Shauna looked at me with dread and I could see the blood drain from her face too. And our other friend Mary looked eyes wide open at me and paced to me to confirm it. Shauna looked too and said, "Oh my God." I ran over to the window and then they followed. The window to this room was facing the front garden. I held onto the frame and leant out as far as was safe and said hesitantly, "Excuse me." I couldn't see the man because he was sheltered by the slight window porches we had, but we could see his shadow being stretched and catch over the drive, lit by our hallway light. "Excuse me, can I help you?" I said a little louder. I continued to shout variations of this as my concern grew, so did the bass in my voice. We stopped to listen, and we heard an awful grumbling. He was talking to himself. We grew even more concerned and judged that he was either on something or not mentally put together. We panicked even more, considering what we could do. We decided to wake up Nozoa and her boyfriend. He was the only man in the house, and we felt like he could be able to take the guy if worse came to worse. We stopped and looked at each other and realized that none of us can confirm if or who locked the door when we stumbled back from the pub earlier on in the night. We had a street door and a front door. The front door was wide open, and street door possibly unlocked. Nozoa's boyfriend was panicked by our sense of panic. Him and Mary took control of the situation. Gathering courage to run downstairs, they decided to shut the front door and lock it. His hand was on the street door handle, and we didn't know when he would try to open it. Shauna was on the phone with the police at the same time. I ran and hung out the window again and noticed the man stumbling away from our drive onto the next house's drive. I alerted everybody, and as I did, I realized he was trying to let himself into next door's house too. I panicked because I was sure I heard the sound of their PVC door handle open. Fortunately, I was wrong. As we grew in concern and told the police this information, he continued to try every house for around 3 houses before disappearing from the sight of our front window. After we all debriefed from the event that just unfolded and refolded, everybody went to their rooms. Me and Shauna stayed in the same room that night and didn't sleep for quite some time. I was on holiday in Lisbon and taking in the sights one day in the Alfama district. I stumbled on this beautiful terrace garden on the side of a cliff face. I have a thing for Portuguese mosaics, and this terrace had a huge mosaic on the side of a building I just had to see up close. So going into the garden, I see there's about 4 or 5 people, and as I'm looking the other way, a little wrinkled old man sidles up to me with bottles of water in a big bag. He asked me in broken English if I'd like some water, and I said, no, I'm fine. To be honest, if I was in the driest desert dying of thirst, I would have refused that water. He then asked me where I'm from. I tell him Scotland. He smiles and extends his hand, so I go to shake it. Well, all of a sudden, he grabs my hand and pulls me towards him as he puckers up for a kiss. In that second, what I thought had been just an old, wizened man turned into a much stronger man with a strange glint in his eyes. His eyes scared the living daylights out of me. Well, as you can imagine, I was having none of that and walked hurriedly out of the terrace back onto the street. So I'm making my way up the hill and look behind me to see that little old man pick up the pace and follow me. Just shows you how looks can be deceiving. So I'm trying to shake him off, but he keeps following me. Thankfully, there are people around about, so I don't really feel threatened, but I notice 2 police officers, so head towards them thinking that he'll halt him in his tracks. Sure enough, as I approach the police, he ducks down an alley and is out of sight. I don't see him again after that and carry on with my day. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/LetsReadOfficial, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And join my Discord to interact with me and other listeners directly. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all these stories in long compilation form and save huge on data, located on both Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and remember, a little slappy makes Daddy happy.